we predict and understand toxicity issues within drug discovery. So when a drug fails, what we like to do is go in and rescue that drug and bring it back to patients as quickly as possible.
Data is treated as the dirty little secret of AI. When it makes headlines, it's usually for a bad reason. I'm Jennifer Ding from Encord. I'm a data scientist, data steward, and even a data festival organizer. I'm into data, and I think we should talk about it more. That is what AI Data Chats is for.
In today's AI Data Chat, we are here with Layla Hosseini-Gerami, co-founder and chief data science officer of Ignota Labs. Welcome, Layla. What is our AI data topic for today, and what are you pairing it with?
Hi, Jen. It's great to be here. So my AI hot topic of the day is going to be about the issues with the data that we have for AI drug discovery and how we really don't know how good these models are in a real life situation when we're using public data sets, just because of how big chemical space is and how biased it is and how different chemical structures that we might be testing with the models might look completely different to things that the model has seen. And I'm pairing it today with a lemon and ginger and honey drink, a bit spicy, but hopefully warming and optimistic.
Oh, I love it. Spicy and warming. Amazing. Well, go ahead with your hot take.
Yeah, absolutely. So AI drug discovery has really exploded over recent years for good reason as well. We know that AI has got lots of applications from the beginning of the pipeline to the end, from things like target discovery, lead optimization, even things like optimizing clinical trials. But one kind of elephant in the room that I don't think gets talked about enough is the limitations with the data that we have, especially for building chemical structure based models. So I mentioned that chemical space is huge. The potential space of chemicals that could be made, if you look at all of the different atoms in the periodic table, is about 10 to the 60. This is a huge incomprehensible amount, and companies are getting more and more focused on really exploring that vast chemical space and trying to find things that look different from what has been developed before. That's great, but the issue is when it comes to trying to build models for that, because data sets that are out there, they are very limited in the area of chemical space that they cover. And you can build a model with a 99% accuracy on that very small cluster of chemical space. But there really isn't any way to know realistically how well that's going to do on a new molecule that you might be synthesizing. And that's a really big limitation that isn't really being addressed yet.
Thank you for bringing such important topic. Many times in AI data, we think about data sets like memes on the internet or random poems or pieces of text that we're generating from an LLM. But the data sets you're working with in the drug discovery space sound like a completely different beast. So it'd be great to better understand actually what data sets are available. How are they produced at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're thinking kind of specifically about data sets for predicting properties of molecules, some really popular ones are data sets like Chembl and PubChem. So these data sets contain what's called bioactivity data. So that's essentially measuring how well a drug is binding to a protein of interest. And that protein of interest might be relevant in a disease, or it might be relevant for causing safety issues. So it's really important to be able to understand and predict what those properties are for new compounds. These data sets are great. They're publicly available. They have millions of data points within them. And typically how they're built is, well, in Chembl's case, it's through manual curation. So there's a big team that goes and looks through the literature, looks at tables and things where this data is stored and puts them in a standardized format within the database for anyone to download. Importantly as well with the metadata, like how was that data measured? Because you could measure it in so many different ways. And then that often has consequences for the downstream modeling. And PubChem is more kind of what are called high throughput screens. So a lab might do a really big experiment where they screen hundreds of compounds against a protein of interest, and they can upload that data to the database for everyone else to use.
Curation and metadata is definitely our love language here at Encord. So great to hear all these important aspects of the data are included in the data sets that are publicly available. But it sounds like the amount of effort that goes into producing one of these data sets must be immense. Is part of the challenge that these high quality data sets, they're a bit hard to refresh and create new versions of?
Yeah, exactly. We're really limited by what is put out there in the public domain. And that often then comes with consequences in terms of bias because people tend to report when things go well. There is so much hidden data that is present in companies and academic institutions where they did lots of experiments that didn't work out. And that is the kind of challenges in kind of getting that data in the public domain for other people to use.
Interesting to think about what would incentivize more publication of these negative results so that those data sets are also available for use. What is your dream data set? Based on the work you do, what data sets do you wish were more widely available?
Yeah, so we at Ignota Labs, what we like to do is go in and rescue that drug and bring it back to patients as quickly as possible. The way that we do that is by really trying to gain a deep understanding of what that drug is doing to cause that toxicity. And there's a great data set out there that is focused on the mechanism of action of the drug. So how is it treating the disease? And it links the drug to the target it binds to, but then there's a kind of causal chain of events that lead to the treatment of that disease, maybe through different pathways that the drug acts on. And it's a really amazing data set. And what I would love is the same thing, but for toxicity. So really a standardized repository of toxicity mechanisms that are really granular, because we think that if a drug hits this off target, it will cause toxicity. But that understanding of then how does that event link to the actual manifestation of the toxicity is really lacking.
It sounds like data in this case and the work you're doing at Ignota Labs really has life or death consequences, which is a very specific subset of data problems. Do you think that this is something that, let's say, investors or others in your domain of biotech, is this how they think about the importance of data? What are the biggest data challenges in the space at the moment?
Yeah, I think we're starting to talk more and more about the issues with the data in this space and the kind of limitations that it brings. So particularly things like data sparsity, the fact that we might have lots of different measurements for different experiments, but these are measuring different things. So the overall data matrix is very sparse and very difficult to model. There's also the issue that this data is often very siloed and in different companies. Different companies often work on different areas of chemical space, and it would be really great to be able to kind of combine the data from different companies. There has been an initiative called Melody where several pharma companies got together and used federated learning. Each company could benefit from the other company's data without anyone actually seeing the kind of secret data that the companies don't want to release. So I think more strategies like that are going to be happening within the field to really address some of the issues.
Very interesting to learn about these different models of data governance that will facilitate collaboration in this space so that each organization can maintain control of their proprietary data, perhaps, or maybe they're interested in releasing some into the open, but then you can establish these collaborations where people can combine resources so discoveries in the field can be made. I'm wondering if, in addition to these new kinds of collaboration models, if there's any tooling or data infrastructure that you think is really important in the space right now, or is a gap that is missing and should be filled?
I think that in terms of how we can start to better contextualize the predictions that we're getting, it's that interface between the AI and the human and really strengthening the ability for a scientist, someone who doesn't have any experience of the models or how they're built, can really interrogate the predictions in a way that they can interpret and understand. So if I can give an example, our tech team might build a machine learning model for a particular target that we're interested in. That output as is for our chemists to have a look at, there's no information that they can really glean to make a decision on how well is this model going to perform for the molecule that I've just synthesized. So what we can do is start to do things like display the uncertainty of the prediction. So how far away is the molecule that they're testing from the data that the model has been trained on? Can the chemists actually physically see the chemical structures of what's nearby? And they can say, well, I can see as a chemist that the model hasn't seen anything like this molecule, so I don't really trust it. And really being able to strengthen the decision making that the scientists can make based on the AI.
Interesting to think about the points where different domain experts can add their expertise in the form of contextual annotation at different stages in the pipeline. Definitely something we think a lot about here at Oncord, and how to, for example, combine the annotation of clinical notes, handwritten or printed in a report form, PDF form, and this unstructured data with, let's say, a DICOM, so that there can be links between these different sources of truth. I'm wondering, for your case, what are the on-ramps for different domain experts to bring in this context? Is it mostly on the model prediction side and sort of making sense of what might have happened? Or is there opportunities on the data preparation side as well that maybe could be used for model training?
Yeah, so definitely data preparation is one aspect of it. So as I said, within these data sets, you have the metadata where maybe the drug was tested in a different cell line, or maybe it was a mutant form of the protein. And that's something that maybe a machine learning expert wouldn't be able to differentiate between. So having that feedback loop with a biologist and someone who understands what these different assays mean can really help with that kind of curation and cleaning step. But also what we do at Ignota is we use that kind of AI human interaction for sourcing new opportunities for drugs to in-license and turn around. There's lots of information out there on the web at clinicaltrials.gov, different news articles that you can kind of glean that a compound has faced some kind of safety issue. And to pursue the opportunity, we need a lot of information to decide on whether it's something that's worth kind of going after. So we use a tool that uses agentic research to go and find the information that we need, all these unstructured sources, put it into a structured format, and then our team can actually have a look and evaluate based on that. And that has just reduced the research time. Like, it would take a human being days to make one of the reports that this tool can make in a matter of seconds. And then we have the human being just to really verify that what's come out is actually real and realistic.
Sounds like a great agentic workflow to explore some of these untapped sources. Sounds like you're almost like data detectives finding, different leads, if you will, for what could prove to be a signal. I would love to understand a bit more of how you've set up this workflow and how you thought about where best to bring the human into the loop, and where best to let the agent lead on certain tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. So the top of the funnel for this workflow, as I mentioned, it could be like a few different sources. So the tool can either go and scrape clinicaltrials.gov, the news articles, but then sometimes we might be at a conference and we speak to people and we hear that they have some kind of safety problem within their pipeline. So we can put in a drug name that we're interested in. We can put in an indication, say we're like, okay, we want to find a new opportunity in oncology, for example. Or we can input a company name, like we know company X is in trouble. And what happens is then we tell the agent, we want to understand these different aspects of the drugs that we're investigating. So this is the mechanism of action, the target that it's going after, any information about adverse events that we can find out there. And then we can get the agent to decide what to go and research. So that's where the agents come in. They kind of go off and search different sources and then bring them together and summarize them within a report. At that phase, we had done some work on fact checking. So this is a phase where we spent a lot of time seeing what the reports were coming out as and comparing them to the sources and finding cases where sometimes the language model doesn't know, it can't see any information in the source, so it will just make something up because that's just what they do when they're faced with something they don't know. So we have used that to develop a kind of benchmark evaluation set to develop this fact checking, where we kind of asked another language model, this is the output that has come out, these are the sources, do they corroborate, and give a score between 1 and 5. So that means that the human being can then look at the report and also look at the fact check report. And at that point, that's where they will kind of make a decision on whether this is something that's worth pursuing. And yeah, that's the kind of pipeline. And then it's, going and contacting the companies and striking the deal.
Sounds like a really sensible workflow where you have your agent tasked with what it's good at and doing that wide search. So you can narrow down the search space and then chaining in another model to do the fact checking. And each agent or model in the loop is really doing what it's best at, just like your humans in the loop who are best positioned to guide the agents and also decide what actually to do next. I'm curious, from what you found so far, have there been interesting signals that have emerged from the outcome of a few of these iterations that your team is using to prioritize which leads to follow?
We've been able to screen hundreds of thousands of different opportunities. And what we're really finding is that there are lots of opportunities out there, which is really exciting for us because this is something that without this tool, we wouldn't have been able to find what we did find because this information is so hidden in so many different sources and the amount of time it would take us to do. We've been able to identify, I would say, out of the hundreds of thousands that we screened, after going through the funnel, it's between like 10 and 20 per run, per kind of indication bucket that we've been able to, find something that's worth pursuing.
I'd love to understand a bit more about your role as well as Chief Data Science Officer. Could you share a little bit more about what that entails and also when other companies might be interested in investing in this role, what would you advise for them?
So my role as Chief Data Science Officer is to come up with the strategy for how we can use all of the data that's out there to gain insights and make decisions. There's a lot of data, it's very messy. So being able to kind of distill that and say, this is what I think we should do with this data set. These are the kind of insights that we can expect to get. How do we convey that information? So it's not just building the models, it's actually doing that interface with the human as well and producing visualizations, applications, and UIs that can help the scientists to actually make decisions based on what we've built. So that's my role in a nutshell. I would say for companies that want to use data to make decisions, and that's a priority for them within the company to get it as early as possible. I think data science is a really necessary skill to be able to not only build the machine learning models, but actually to do that translational piece and that interpretation to really supercharge what's happening from the machine learning to make sure that it can make an impact.
That's amazing. Making data useful, actionable, translatable for more stakeholders is important. And having an executive level team member thinking about a coherent data strategy sounds really important. So I hope we'll see more chief data science officers like yourself in the future. Wonderful. Well, with that, I will move us on to our final rapid fire round of questions.
Yeah, let's go.
What scale of data are you working with these days?
Millions, lots of different sources, FDA warning labels, chemical structures. So yeah, millions and millions.
Any favorite data sets you've come across recently?
Yeah, so this is the drug MACDV data set I mentioned earlier. So really connecting the drug to the disease through an interpretable and mechanistic causal chain.
What do you think 2025 will be the year of for AI data?
I think it's going to be the year of really understanding why models make the decisions that they do, using data to understand and explain that.
What do you think is an AI data challenge that should be receiving more attention?
I would say the messiness of the data in public repositories and really treating labels as ground truth when, if you look at the metadata, it's often not the case.
Final question to close out today's chat. How was your pairing of your drink with today's data topic?
I think it was absolutely perfect. As I said, like maybe a bit spicy, kind of talking about limitations of AI for drug discovery, but some optimism that, we're moving in the right direction.
Well, thanks for joining us, Layla. Where could we find more of your work?
So you can find more about us at ignotalabs.ai, or you can follow me on LinkedIn if you just search my name on that and connect. I would love to talk to you.
That wraps up this AI data chat. You can find links to our speakers' work in the episode description. If you'd like to share your thoughts or suggest a speaker, email us at aidatachats@encore.com.